Ciguatera fish poisoning.
For those of you who love to hunt fish or even just consume it, there is a hidden risk that could have drastic consequences on your way of life. Ciguatera is a neurotoxin that is extremely harmful to humans. It comes from tiny marine algae that's grown on the reef, which produce the toxins, which get eaten by smaller reef fish, which get eaten by larger predator fish, and then end up on some of our dinner plates.
That yellow jack was way too big, and
everyone got Ciguatera. I'm about to go check on the others and see how they're doing.
Well, I'm gonna leave you out to it. Oh,
that might be me here soon.
I've had Ciguatera fish poisoning 2 times in the last 4 years, and with very little information on the internet about Ciguatera, I figured it was time to share my run-ins with this toxin so that you could avoid what me and many of my friends have been through. So first, I'm going to tell you about my experiences. Then I'm going to tell you how to avoid it with species and locations, and last, I'm going to tell you what to do if you get Ciguatera.
so let's begin. The first time I got Ciguatera was in the Bahamas from a tiger grouper. Adventureman Dan and Captain Jack Spiro also got Ciguatera from a tiger grouper in the Bahamas, so that is a big fish to avoid there. And that was a long time ago, before there was YouTube videos telling you what not to do. So the first time I got it, I ate that tiger grouper. I woke up the next day feeling terrible, but I blamed it on partying with my friends the night before and just thought I was hungover, maybe somewhat sick. I felt weird, like my body was radiating. I had never felt that feeling before and I didn't know the symptoms. So, like a dumbass, I decided to make something healthy, and in my mind, that was fish stew. So I took the rest of that tiger grouper, I cut it up, I put the head and the bones and made this nice broth fish soup, and I ate it all. And that, my friends, almost killed me. For the next 3 days, I did not sleep because I had all the symptoms. I had an erratic heartbeat. My heart was literally stopping for 4 seconds at a time, and then it would like just twitch out and start beating again, which is why I was staying up, because I was scared to go to sleep. I was in the middle of the Bahamas with no hospitals around, by myself, like just scared to death. Some other symptoms was the tingling and the radiation. I feel like I had needles all over my body. My lips, my tongue, my face, everything felt like pins and needles, like I was getting acupuncture all over the place. There was burning sensations, there was numbness. You gotta understand, getting Ciguatera is not like having the flu, being sick in bed for a couple days. It attacks your neurons. That's the equivalent of pouring water on the motherboard of a computer and watching it geek out. Your body just twitches and glitches and has no clue what's going on, and everything reverses and you're just screwed up mentally. And for me, I had symptoms for an entire year. For a whole year, I couldn't eat fish. You can't eat wheat, chocolate, nuts. You can't eat anything processed. I couldn't drink beer because my hands and feet were itching like crazy. I could only eat eggs and potatoes for the first 6 months. Other symptoms include fatigue. I couldn't even walk 20 steps without putting my hands on the knees like I just ran a 5K. Nausea. I was insanely dizzy. Even walking was tough. I felt like I was gonna throw up all the time. I felt weak. I had muscle cramps. It felt like my teeth were literally falling out of my mouth. In fact, before I knew it was Ciguatera, I thought I had some major dental issues going on because my teeth were aching so bad. Not to mention temperature reversal. So hot feels like cold, cold feels like hot. Even drinking lukewarm water felt like swallowing thousands of ice cold needles. There is also another symptom that's pretty personal and tough for me to explain to you guys, but class is in session. Let's say you and your wife do the hanky-panky. Afterwards, this is what it feels like. You're gonna be sitting there in the fetal position with your knees against your chest, wishing that you were a born-again virgin. You are going to have to battle the temptations until your symptoms subside weeks and weeks later. Now, I'm only gonna talk about the Caribbean because that's where I've sailed. I don't know other parts of the world and other species, but let's start with the Bahamas. So in the Bahamas, some major fish to avoid are tiger grouper, barracuda, dogfish or dog snapper, schoolmaster, amberjack.
Now, you may eat one of these fish and be totally fine. However, these are the most common species that have a high chance of having Ciguatera, and fish that, well, most of the locals avoid. Let's dive deeper on these 5 fish, starting with tiger grouper. Anyone new to the world of spearfishing will quickly realize that many species look a lot alike underwater. To an untrained eye, tiger grouper can look a lot like black grouper, yellowfin grouper, and possibly even a Nassau grouper due to its shape. And these are the most common 4 you're gonna see in the Bahamas. You'll see little rock hinds and scamps, but those tend to be smaller, and groupers need to be a minimum of 3 pounds or more to be legally harvested in the Bahamas. And Nassaus have a season on them, so check that. Now, tiger groupers have a bad reputation of carrying Ciguatera, but luckily they have a literal telltale sign that helps us tell them apart. Their tails are nasty and ragged and look like a ripped up pirate flag. A quick glance at these 2 pictures and you might think these 3 are the same fish, but this is a black grouper, this is a yellowfin grouper, and guess what this is? Good guess. Dumbass probably saw the ripped up fins. So if you can find all these fish on the same reef, why would the tiger grouper be the only one that has Ciguatera? Well, that's a lie. It's not. We avoid the tiger grouper because it has a higher chance of having more ciguatoxin in it, and that's because this tiger grouper is the slowest growing grouper out of these 4 species. I'm no scientist, but I asked ChatGPT and it said a 3-pound black grouper could be about 1.5 years old, whereas a 3-pound tiger grouper could be around 6 years old. And they don't get near as big as the others, so you might be shooting a small tiger grouper, but it could be an old ass fish that's eating a lot of ciguatoxin. And this applies to all species of fish, not just grouper. We're talking snapper and whatever the hell else other fish there are that eat reef fish, but you gotta know the species, its diet, and the size to determine whether it's an old fish or not to know if it has a good chance of having high levels of ciguatoxin. Moving on to barracuda, or the Cuban wahoo. I don't know if that's racist or not, but I'm a little bit Cuban, so I can say it, but I wouldn't repeat that in public. You might catch one of these way offshore in thousands of feet of water. However, you can also find them in their early days hunting reef fish in the shallows. And despite their notorious reputation for giving Ciguatera, the locals in the Bahamas love to roll the dice and eat these things. Some claim it depends on which side of the island you catch them, others say don't eat them longer than 2.5 feet, but I'm not buying any of that, and I'm definitely not risking my balls on a cuda. Amberjacks, also known as the reef donkeys. Yes, you can find them hanging on the reefs eating reef fish. And donkey because you'd be a jackass if you ate one in the Bahamas. Well, and they fight like a mule. But here's a video of one I shot in the Bahamas back before I knew you couldn't eat them, because back where I come from in Florida, we do eat them. You can literally see me pulling a reef fish out of its throat. Well, I took it to the dock and the local told me not to eat it, and we ended up cutting it up and feeding it to the pet nurse sharks. Dogfish or dog snapper. These can look like a mutton, a smaller cubera, or even a large mangrove. We eat a ton of different kinds of snappers, but this is one we avoid because the locals don't touch it themselves. You can identify these by the teardrop shape they have below their eyes. If you don't know your species very well, a general rule of thumb for both grouper and snapper, including the sought after hogfish, is if it's smaller than your forearm, basically from your elbow to the tip of your finger, then it's probably going to be fine to eat. Keyword probably. Schoolmaster is one of the last ones that the locals don't even touch, and we put it on the list because they are everywhere in the Bahamas and they look delicious, but also because they slightly resemble a yellow tail snapper, which is a fish that I would classify as safe to eat. We also eat a lot of lionfish in the Bahamas, and these guys live on the reef and eat nothing but reef fish, so they can have Ciguatera. However, they spawn quick and grow fast, so as long as you're not eating old grandpa, then you're probably fine. Now, lobster, conch, and crab aren't known to have it. They eat little organisms off the reef, but they aren't known to feed on the little microalgae that have the ciguatoxin. Now bear with me, we're almost through the Bahamas, but it's going to translate down the entire Caribbean. There's a few more common species that we target in the Bahamas that you can find in the reef, but you can also find out deep. And they're not really related to the grouper or snapper, so I'm just going to call these guys weird ledge fish. And in this category, you've got your triggerfish, your yellow jacks, your African pompanos, and your permit, which feed off of crabs, so you don't gotta worry about sig with them. And of course, we can't forget about the mackerels, like the Spanish and our favorite sushi ever, the Cerro mackerel, and the kingfish, which I would probably avoid in the Bahamas. Occasionally, you'll find a wandering rainbow runner, which is good to eat. And then you move on to your pelagics, like your black and yellowfin tuna, your mahi, and your wahoo, which you don't have to worry about sig with. Okay, let's move down the Caribbean chain. Now you've got the Dominican Republic, where we didn't spear at all because you got to clear out with the Navy anytime you leave the dock, so I can't speak for this area. Moving east, we got Puerto Rico, but there was just too much alcohol in the water, so we didn't spear much there either. In fact, the whitecaps that you see when you're sailing is actually beer foam. On a real note, I do have some very close sources that say Puerto Rico is a high-risk zone. In fact, from here to the Virgin Islands, where we just got Ciguatera, all the way to St. Martin, I would consider a high-risk area. And in this area, I would only eat lobster, pelagic fish, maybe some small reef fish recommended by the locals, and anything they would catch in deep water dropping like tilefish, snowy grouper, or queen snapper. Now, we are currently down in Grenada, but once you get past Dominica, basically what we've heard is that sig is a lot less present, although not completely absent. So I would use the same cautionary approach that we used when we were up in the Bahamas. Once again, these are just general guidelines we use. We are not scientists, and we're only sharing our personal experiences to help us all have a better understanding. So use these guidelines at your own risk.
So what do you do if you get Ciguatera? Well, there's some remedies out there like rosemary tea and some other things. They might help speed up the recovery, but not noticeably. There is no magic solution that's going to make you feel better. However, if you know the initial symptoms, which I touched on earlier, such as feeling nauseous, like you gotta throw up, listen to your body, because within the first 6 hours, you can decrease your long-term symptoms dramatically. So what happens is you'll feel the symptoms in the first 2 to 6 hours after you consume the Ciguatera. Once you feel dizzy or nauseous and you feel like you gotta throw up, you need to throw up. You have to purge your body as much and as fast as you can to get the toxins out. If you can't throw up, you gotta get it out the other way. Chug vitamin C, chug laxative, get it out of your system as fast as you can. The second thing we do, we take activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is known to attach to the toxins and poisons in your body and get it out of your system. And this really only works if you take it within the first 6 hours. You can get this stuff in any pharmacy over the counter. It's just black pills like this, activated charcoal. You can take a whole handful of this stuff. It's not gonna kill you. It might make you constipated. So they do recommend taking like a stool softener because your turds will be pretty solid and pretty black when you take this. But we keep it on the boat strictly for Ciguatera. So purge and take activated charcoal as fast as you can. Let's quickly talk about wives' tales because there are so many of them out there. If your dog doesn't eat it, it doesn't have sig. If your cat doesn't eat it, if the ants don't eat it, if the flies don't land on it, if you put it in your lip like a piece of dip and wait for 20 or 30 minutes and your lip doesn't itch, it doesn't have sig. Now, I'm not saying any of that is false, but nothing's proven and I'm not buying it. Even those nerds down there at Pfizer can't even detect this stuff with their most technologically advanced microscope. And no, you cannot cook this stuff out of the fish. I don't care if you burn it to a black charcoal crisp, the sig will still be in there and you will still poison yourself by ingesting it. You can have it sent off to a lab to get tested, but by the time you get the results back, you're defrosting your fish. Lastly, there are a bunch of fish I mentioned that do have Ciguatera, and you might say, well, I've eaten those fish and I haven't gotten sig. Well, everyone has an invisible health meter, let's say. You might eat a bunch of fish that have sig, but everyone's got a threshold and you don't feel it until you cross that threshold. It could take 47 fish, it could take one potent fish, but take it from me, you do not want to cross that threshold, which is why I made this video. Okay guys, I think I touched on everything there is to know about Ciguatera. If I forgot anything, then just leave a comment below and I'll try to answer them and get to you as quick as possible. But like I said, that was old footage. I'm perfectly fine now. We do have one more episode that is from that time era, and then we're gonna be caught up to present time spirit animals. And Sasha, what did I miss? Did I miss anything?
Well, we want to give a huge thank you to all of our patrons. Our upper tier patrons, mega thank you. You guys get your names on the spirit animal. We really cannot do this journey without you guys, and we cannot thank you enough for that.
And lastly, if you haven't yet, please hit subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like, and join us next week for another adventure here on Spirit Animal.